My name is Maya Collins, and I'm 32. The night everything tilted, we were seated under soft chandeliers at the Willow Creek Country Club, where my father raised his glass to my younger sister Stella and called me self-absorbed with a smile that told the room it was a harmless joke. It wasn't harmless. It was the punchline I'd been living with since childhood. I grew up in Maplebridge, a tidy suburb west of Chicago where lawns were trimmed in straight lines and parents traded progress reports like currency. In our house, the household trophy, literal or not, always landed in Stella's hands. My father Gregory liked to say she'd never met a stranger, and he wasn't wrong. Stella sparkled. I worked. When I made honor roll for the 3rd year running, he said, "Good job, kiddo," without looking up from his emails. When Stella snagged 3 lines in the school play, he bought roses and took us all downtown for dinner. My mother Helen preferred calm to confrontation. After the louder moments, she would tap my shoulder and murmur, "He loves you differently." Eventually, I decoded that differently meant less, or not in any way I could hold. At 16, when my parents divorced, the imbalance found new ways to breathe. Overnight, Stella became Dad's rockin' little compass, the one he took on outings during weekend visitations, while I learned to be low maintenance. His new apartment had a view of the river, and a silence I filled by doing homework at the kitchen counter. If I hinted that I wanted in on the plans, he'd chuckle. "Maya, you're tough. Stella's sensitive." College widened the gap into a canyon. I was told that independence would build character, so I worked 30 hours a week and studied the rest, keeping my GPA high enough to feel like proof. Stella, by contrast, received help that arrived without discussion. Tuition paid a small car, a nicer apartment than anything I'd ever rented. When she bounced between majors, campuses, and boyfriends, Dad called it creative exploration. When I asked why the rules didn't match, he said, "Academics came easy to me," which was funny for a girl who slept next to a stack of flashcards. After graduation, I joined a marketing firm downtown and learned the art of 80-hour weeks. Promotions and polite applause followed. So did the feeling that my life was a list. Stella pinballed through jobs, a front desk here, a boutique there, leaving each when the gloss wore off. She lived with men who called her sunshine until the weather changed. 2 years ago, the call came at 11:30 p.m. Stella's voice was a tangle of tears. Tyler had ended things, rent was due in 3 days, and Dad's spare room had become a home gym. Just for a few weeks, she asked. My 1-bedroom wasn't built for 2, and I knew from experience that proximity to Stella came with a tax on sleep and sanity. I said no to the couch, yes to a lifeboat. I found her a small studio in Logan Square, well earned $200 a month, and promised to cover the first 3 months while she found full-time work. She was radiant with gratitude for exactly a week. Then gratitude settled into routine. 3 months blurred into 6 explanations, multiplying like receipts, scheduling issues, anxiety, a doctor's appointment, a temporary dip in hours. I networked on her behalf, forwarded openings, and watched my own plans. The master's program, I'd flagged the down payment fund, the simple idea of a vacation go fuzzy at the edges. Meanwhile, Stella's social media showed vineyards, rooftop brunches, and dresses with the tags still on. When I asked about the dissonance, she called me judgmental and swore me to secrecy. "I'm embarrassed," she said. "I was the one sending the wire transfers." At family gatherings, the narrative never changed. Dad praised Stella's spirit and warned me not to let work steal my 20s, which it already had. If I skipped a dinner because of a deadline, I was reminded that family matters. If I declined to chip in for an extravagant group gift, I was told I had different priorities. They weren't wrong. My priorities were rent someone else's and an ache I couldn't name. 2 days before the country club dinner, Stella called again. Her voice was syrupy with hope. "I found a pop-up event," she said. "A real chance to start a micro boutique. I just need $300 for the vendor table. I could triple it back." I heard myself say, "Okay?" Even as a quieter version of me shook her head. I hit transfer and told myself this was the last 1 more month. I didn't know it yet, but the seed of the storm had been planted. All it needed was a room full of candles and a father's toast to grow. I arrived at the Willow Creek Country Club a few minutes late, the kind of late that makes you walk faster than you want to in heels. Through the glass, I could see the private dining room already glowing linen silver, and the mild hush of people who know exactly which fork is for salad and which is for dessert. A maitre d' checked my name, lifted the velvet rope, and with a neutral smile delivered me to my family tableau, like a courier with fragile cargo. Dad Gregory Collins, in a navy blazer that fit like certainty, rose when he saw me. "There she is," he said to the table, a host unveiling an entree. "Our very own rainmaker." The guests turned with polite interest. I recognized the Rochesters from Dad's golf circle, and the Klein's neighbors from his cul-de-sac who had known Stella since she sold lemonade and charm in equal measure. At Dad's right sat his wife Sabrina, in a soft cream sheath dress, her nails a careful nude. She gave me the smile reserved for cordial weather and difficult relatives. Across from her, my sister Stella leaned in close to Mrs. Klein, laughter bubbling from her like soda. "Traffic," I said. Apologizing to no one in particular, I took the chair Sabrina indicated 2 seats down from Dad, diagonal from Stella, and placed my napkin on my lap, that small flag of surrender to civility. The room smelled faintly of lemon oil and steak. A server slid a glass of Sauvignon Blanc to my elbow. I nodded thanks and took a measured sip. The first swallow smoothed the edges of my nerves but sharpened my senses in a way I didn't expect. Perhaps that's why I noticed the handbag first. It rested on the empty chair beside Stella, half tucked under, half displayed as expensive things often are, the kind of leather that knows its own price. New, unmistakably new, the hardware unscuffed, the edges unsullied by city grit. It was not from the thrift stores Stella claimed to curate when she needed talking points about sustainability. It was the kind you buy when numbers in a checking account mean decoration, not survival. Mrs. Klein cooed the way certain adults never stop cooing at my sister. "Darling, that color is heaven." "What do they call it?" Yable Stella said, as if she'd named it herself. "A little investment piece." Investment piece. The phrase landed with a ridiculous thud in my chest. 2 days earlier, the same voice had been sticky with urgency over the phone, Maya. "It's a chance to get a vendor table to launch my micro-boutique, just $300 up front. I swear I'll triple it." The wire transfer had gone out before I'd hung up. "Shall we?" Dad held up his glass and everyone adopted their toast faces. He excelled at these small rituals, at arranging people like a vignette to flatter the room he was in. To family, he said. To grit and to joy. To busy seasons and to making time for what matters. His gaze settled on Stella, then on me, a seesaw in a sentence. "Maya keeps us all afloat with her work ethic," he went on, his voice dipped in benevolence. "And Stella reminds us the point is to live. Balance between the two now, that's the trick." I smiled the way you do when there's a photographer. Around me, glasses chimed. Across the table, Stella beamed a star, catching her light. Dinner began its small procession. Bread with salted butter. A chilled soup pale as green tea. The Rochesters narrated a new pickleball injury. Sabrina described an herb garden as if it were a philosophy. I answered pleasant questions about marketing trends and repositioning campaigns and nodded while Mr. Klein explained my job back to me in fewer, worse words. Stella supplied color commentary, a studio she discovered that offered candle-making workshops and tarot in the same afternoon. The brunch spot in Wicker Park with a wait list, but totally worth it, they foamed the lavender. The handbag continued to radiate its quiet thesis from the chair. "Speaking of weekends," Mrs. Rochester said, patting her bob, "I hear you're off somewhere sunny." Stella's eyes flared the tiniest bit, then gentled. "Oh, just a little girl's escape," she said. "Nothing wild." Cayo Santa Maria, Sabrina supplied. "Stella is very resourceful at finding deals." I turned to my napkin as if it had lines of scripture. Cayo Santa Maria had not been in the vendor table pitch. Neither had sable leather. The wine turned metallic on my tongue. Dad misread my silence as an opening. "Maya, you should take a page from your sister's book," he said, jovial as a commercial. "All those hours you log, life's not a ledger." I set my glass down carefully. Some ledgers keep roofs over heads. Something in the air shifted by a degree. Not enough for the untrained to notice. Plenty for the people who'd learned the family weather pattern. Sabrina's smile acquired structure. "We're all just glad you're here," she said. "Let's enjoy tonight." Appetizers cleared. Entrees arrived. The talk swelled and receded in little tides, and I let it carry me, watching Stella surf it with familiar grace. The old ache pressed behind my ribs, The ache of being the cautionary tale in a house that pretended I was the example. Tell them about the ceramics, Sabrina prompted, light as whipped cream. Stella laced her fingers together, bashful on cue. There's this ceramics studio in Bucktown, she said. They do a 6-week intensive wheel throwing, glazing the works. I've always wanted to try. It's a little pricey, but it feeds the soul, you know. That's exactly the kind of thing you should be doing. Dad said, his pride a hand at her back. You have instincts. Creativity. Life isn't only productivity metrics. Mrs. Klein looked at me with pity disguised as warmth. Do you have any passions outside the office, Maya? I had planned to enroll in 2 evening courses this summer, I said. Advanced analytics. Budget didn't cooperate. Budgets. Mr. Rochester chuckled, already deciding. Young people worry too much about credentials. What you need is experience. I heard myself ask softly, whose experience? Silence flexed its shoulders for a second, then shrugged them off. It could have ended there, a small, forgettable bruise. But families like ours are built on phrases that never get examined because they're monogrammed. Dad polished one now. Look, he said, in the tone of man-to-man counsel, even though I am neither. Stella doesn't make a lot, but she knows how to squeeze joy out of $1. You, and here his smile grew cure-tinged, you make more than enough, and somehow you never have room for anything. The line went through me like a knitting needle. Somehow, I repeated. My voice was steady. Inside, 1,000 little birds beat at the same window. Sabrina tried to ease the angle. He means you deserve to treat yourself, she said. You work so hard. Treating myself, I said, is how we ended up here. No one asked what I meant. They didn't need to. The room could feel the weather veer, and every diner is a barometer of self-preservation. Even the server approaching with pepper paused at a safe distance. I reached for the calm I cultivate in client meetings, the one that lets me name an elephant without sounding like I want to ride it into battle. Dad, I said, turning to him, when was the last time you helped Stella pay her rent? He blinked as if I'd introduced a new topic out of season. I covered a deposit once, he said slowly. And there's the odd shop a little boost here and there. I nodded. And the monthly rent? Who takes care of that? Stella found her cuticles fascinating. Her lipstick, a soft coral, seemed suddenly too bright for the table. The Rochesters and the Kleins grew very interested in their steaks. Sabrina's hand landed lightly on Dad's sleeve, either in warning or in solidarity. With Sabrina, it can be both. Maya, Dad said, his voice dipping into command. This is hardly... I've been paying it, I said. The sentence sat on the linen between us like a steel paperweight. For 2 years, $1,200 a month, direct transfer to the landlord. No thunder followed, no cinematic clatter of forks. Just that particular quiet I know from boardrooms, a vacuum where a truth rearranges the oxygen. Stella lifted her head and tried on indignation, then removed it, finding the fit poor. Dad laughed, a short rejecting sound, and shook his head as if to dispel a fly. That's not. It is, I said. That's where the room for hobbies and trips and ceramics classes goes. Into not having my sister evicted. Maya! Sabrina's voice was velvet on a hinge. This might be better discussed. In private, I asked, not unkindly. We've been private for 24 months. Privacy hasn't made it truer. I looked at Stella. 2 days ago, you asked me for $300 for a vendor table, a start for your boutique. Tonight, I'm looking at an investment piece bag and hearing about a Caribbean weekend. It was a gift, she said quickly. From whom? A friend, she said, which is what you call people when their names would make the explanation worse. Dad's jaw had set in that paternal V I knew from childhood, the shape arguments made in our house. Even if what you're saying is accurate, he said. Careful, it doesn't justify ambushing your sister in front of friends. Ambushing, I repeated. Or unmasking. I am tired of being treated like I'm withholding sweetness from my life because I enjoy spreadsheets. The sweetness goes somewhere. It has gone somewhere steadily for 2 years. You could have said no, Stella said, small and hard at once. Yes, I said. And I didn't. That's on me. It stopped being on me tonight. Sabrina leaned forward, palms up. Let's breathe. We can come up with a plan. Perhaps we split the rent for a while as a bridge. The word bridge grated. Bridges have destinations. We had had circles. Here's the plan, I said, and the steadiness surprised even me. Stella, you have 30 days. Find roommates. Move to a neighborhood that matches your income. Increase your hours. Those are adult solutions. They aren't punishments. Dad's voice rose for the first time, the host becoming the father. You can't just cut her off. Where is she supposed to go? Your house has a gym, I said. Gyms convert wonderfully. Or I added, because the part of me that used to apologize for oxygen was done, you could help her. You and Sabrina, you've always said family helps. Mrs. Klein toyed with her water-glass eyes somewhere in the chandelier. Mr. Rochester cleared his throat in a way that suggested golf the universal solvent. The server reappeared with a tray of desserts and stood there immobilized like a minor character in a play who's realized the scene is not about cake. Why are you doing this here? Dad asked the word. Here, carrying more weight than the linens. Is this revenge? Do you want attention? No, I said. I want accuracy. You want to know why I don't take vacations? Why skin disease? Why I always say no to the pottery class and the weekend away because I have been underwriting a life I do not live. And I'm done. Stella's eyes shone, but this time they didn't turn me to putty. You enjoy making me the problem, she said softly, accusingly, the 1-2 rhythm she'd practiced since we were 2 bedrooms apart in the same hall. I enjoy not being a solution to choices I didn't make, I replied. It might have escalated past the point of salvage then into something jagged and unrepeatable, but the room's courage ran out before ours did. Sabrina lifted her hand, and the server, grateful for instruction, set down the desserts. Tiramisu, he offered to no one, the ritual thin but sturdy enough to hold. I folded my napkin and placed it beside my plate, the quiet clack of decision. Thank you for dinner, I said to the table at large. Please don't let this ruin your evening. Dad stood as if to intercept me. Maya, I'm not storming out, I said, even as I rose. I'm just done pretending. 30 days, Stella, if you need recommendations for roommate boards or cheaper neighborhoods. I have a list. I turned, feeling the room as a temperature behind me, the hum of conversations recalibrating the clink of glassware, embarrassed by proximity to a truth. The maitre d' materialized to open the door, tender as a mortician. The hallway outside felt over-air-conditioned, the kind of cold that makes your arms feel newly separate from your body. In the glass of a framed landscape, I caught a ripple of my self-hair, smooth lipstick intact, a woman who looked like she could pass any audit. Inside, my heart ricocheted like a trapped moth. I walked heel to heel, the echo in the corridor like a metronome insisting step, step, step. In the parking lot, the sky had folded itself into a darker blue, the club lights pinning the night like jewelry. My phone buzzed on cue, a text from Dad. We will discuss this in the morning when you're calm. Another from Sabrina. I didn't know truly. Let's regroup privately. 2 from unknown numbers that turned out to be the Rochesters, offering nothing more than the digital equivalent of averted eyes. I sat in the driver's seat and didn't start the car. The silence wasn't pure. It held the thin tremor of adrenaline settling. I put my hands on the wheel and waited for the shaking to pass. It didn't, not entirely, but it changed tenor from terror to something that tasted like air after rain. Through the windshield, I could see across the manicured hedges a slice of the dining room, a chandelier bathing people in flattering light. I pictured Dad regrouping with Sabrina, Stella being petted into composure, the Rochesters telling a safe story about a safe sport. The narrative would be crafted in my absence. It always had been. Tonight, I had given it a competing draft. I thought of the $300 I'd sent with a caption promising possibility. I thought of the leather handbag, sable unscathed. I thought of my own ledger, the one I balanced at midnight, while the city slept tuition line items. I'd postponed a modest line called Condo Fund that had stalled like a secondhand clock, a smaller line called Vacation that had never upgraded from the planning stage. 30 days, I said out loud to the windshield to myself. It sounded like a sentence. It sounded like a beginning. I turned the key. The engine answered an ordinary blessing. As I pulled out, the guard at the gatehouse waved without looking up from his phone. I merged into the softness of the suburban road and let the dark gather me. I did not feel brave. I felt accurate. There would be fallout and phone calls and performances of hurt. There would be new ways for old roles to reassert themselves. But the boundary had been drawn in a place I could stand. Halfway home at a red light, a banner on my phone lit up with a new text from Helen. My mother, who hadn't been there, who never wanted to be where the plates might rattle. Heard you spoke up. Are you okay? Call me when you're ready. It was more than nothing. The light turned green. I went forward. Behind me, in a room of chandeliers, the story I had been cast in for 32 years was revising itself without my permission. Ahead, the night made room for a version of me I hadn't met yet, a woman who spent what she earned on the future she wanted, who didn't apologize for closing the tab on someone else's open bar. The road curved steady as a sentence. For the first time in a long while, I did not edit myself as I drove. Tomorrow would make its demands. Tonight, I let the engine's hum tell my body I had not just detonated my life, but relocated it. I rolled down the window an inch, and the air coming in was clean. 30 days. Then whatever comes next. I could live with that. I slept at Derek's place that night, if you can call it sleep. I drifted and surfaced, replaying the candlelit room like security footage, the toast, the handbag, my voice crossing the linen, and landing with a thud. At 3 a.m., Derek brought me water and said, "Accuracy isn't cruelty." I held the glass with 2 hands like a small ceremony and let the sentence steady me. By morning, my phone looked like a fire alarm. A long message from Gregory, my father, about propriety and discretion. A shorter one from Sabrina I truly didn't know. "Let's talk privately." A string from Stella that changed voice every 3 texts, outraged pleading, then sugary. "We can fix this if you stop making it a thing." One from Helen, my mother, the only one that asked a question instead of issuing a verdict. "Are you safe? Call when you can," I showered. Put on a navy dress that had passed every kind of meeting and walked to the train with the strange lightness that follows the end of a migraine. At my desk, I opened my laptop, made coffee, and wrote the first email of the new era notice to landlord. I confirmed the autopay would end in 30 days per my agreement with Stella. I asked for a receipt. I CC'd Stella not for drama, but for documentation. The message was clean without adjectives. At 9:40, the receptionist called my extension. "Maya," she whispered, as if the phone were a mouth at my ear. "Your sister is in the lobby. She's crying." Of course she was. Public tears had always been Stella's accelerant. "I'm in meetings until 4, I said. "Please offer her water and the number of the corporate counseling line. If she refuses to leave, call security." There was a pause, the kind where someone reconsiders their job description. "Are you sure?" "I am," I said, and let my yes be yes. 5 minutes later, my cell lit up with an unlisted number. "You had me kicked out," Stella said when I answered. The anger in her voice was crisp enough to cut. "What kind of sister does that?" "The kind who doesn't do workplace scenes," I said. "We can talk at 6. Not here." "You know I can't afford the apartment alone," she said. Jumping tracks. "You want me on the street? I want you in housing you can actually pay for," I said. "Roommates." "Cheaper neighborhood." "More hours." "Those are the options." "That's not my lifestyle," she shot back, as if lifestyle were a lease. "All my connections are in Wicker Park." "You don't need connections to sign a sublease in Ravenswood," I said. "Or Albany Park or Edgewater. I'll send listings after work. We're done for now." I hung up before the tears returned. I have learned that if I stay on the line long enough, other people's emergencies become my assignments. At lunch, I took a walk and called Helen. She listened the way she does when she remembers she knows how. "I suspected your father wasn't the one paying," she admitted. I should have asked. Would asking have changed anything I said, and heard the edge in my voice? Or would we have kept the peace and carried on? "I don't know," she said honestly. "But I'm proud of you for telling the truth, even if the place wasn't ideal." She sighed. "Your father cares about optics. You care about facts. You both think you're the adult in the room." "I am the adult who pays the bills," I said, and then softened. "I'm tired, Mom." "I can meet you after work," she said. "Not to mediate, to feed you." I smiled at a bus stop. "Okay." Back at my desk, I did the work that keeps the lights on a deck for a client who wanted to be premium but accessible, which is marketing for we want it both ways. At 3, my office line rang. Caller ID, G. Collins. He knew I would pick up a landline. "I am disappointed," he opened like a memo. "You ambushed your sister and embarrassed this family." I corrected a record, I said. "In the only room where the record was being written." He exhaled. I pictured him at his desk, tie loose and looking out at the golf course as if the lawn could help. "Even if you've been assisting her, you don't end support as punishment." "It's not punishment," I said. "It's right-sizing. If you think it's wrong, you can cover the difference. Convert the gym. Our circumstances are not the same, he said smoothly. Which is what men say when they have resources and you have obligations. I have retirement to plan a mortgage. So do I said. Except my retirement hasn't begun to exist because I've been doing yours and hers at the same time. He shifted tack. Compromise, he said, as if the word itself were the solution. You pay half the rent for 6 months. She transitions. Everyone saves face. Half is a forever word in this family, I said. It becomes 9 months and then a year. No. These absolutes. Boundaries, I said gently. Not ultimatums. I gave her 30 days and a path. If she takes it, good. If she doesn't, that's still not my mortgage. He made a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite a groan. You're stubborn. I'm consistent, I said, and for once it wasn't a defense. After work, I met Helen at a diner that smelled like coffee and sincerity. She ordered meatloaf. I ordered a sandwich and ate the tomato with a fork, something I do when I need proof that decisions can be simple. We did not litigate the dinner. We talked about plants hers are thriving. Mine die when I look away, and I let the ordinary refuel me. At home later, I opened my laptop and drafted a template. Boundary replies, so I wouldn't have to improvise every time my phone pulled fire. I can't discuss this during work hours. I'm available after 6 for 20 minutes by phone. Here are 3 affordable neighborhoods and roommate boards. No cash transfers. I will help you move boxes on one day within the next month. I also booked an extra session with Dr. Rima, my therapist. You are grieving a version of yourself, she said the next afternoon, after I told the story without embroidery. The specialist fixer. She's useful, but she keeps you from being a person. Hold a small memorial for her. I laughed until I didn't. She gave me a question to carry. What would a loving older sister do that does not require self-abandonment? She asked me to write a not-to-do list. I wrote, no secret payments, no unplanned drop-ins, no debates after 9 p.m., no pretending I'm fine when I'm not. On day 5, Stella texted a photo of a kitten with a caption. Remember when we begged for one? I did. The cat allergy was my father's, but the no was mine. I put the phone face down and answered later with a link to roomies.com and 3 listings in Ravenswood. She responded with a skull emoji, then fine. I'll look. On day 7, Sabrina called. For what it's worth, she said, I believe you. About the money. I would never have defended the pottery class if I had known. For what it's worth. I said I appreciate the sentence in the present tense. I can give Stella 2 boxes of kitchenware she offered as if that could balance a ledger. And I'll talk to your father about tone. Thank you, I said, meaning it. I have learned to take crumbs without mistaking them for cake. The week wore on and began paradoxically to feel normal. I slept. I ran by the lake and remembered my body could move without a meeting. I took a notebook to a cafe and wrote graduate program's pros, cons at the top of the page just to see the words under my hand. On payday, I moved $1 and $200 into a line called Condo Fund and took a screenshot, a tiny photo of a new habit. Day 10, 8:12 p.m. Stella knocked on my apartment door. No mascara tracks, no sable leather, just jeans and a black t-shirt, hair in a knot that looked like it had learned humility. I did not invite her in. We walked to the corner and sat on a low stone wall that divided the sidewalk from a neat strip of municipal rose bushes. I've been awful, she said without preamble. The words were as unfamiliar in her mouth as manual labor. Not just the money, the lying, the story I let Dad tell about you. I kept my hands in my pockets. Okay, I said. I found a place she went on faster now that the door was cracked. Ravenswood. 3 girls aloft that used to be a dance studio. My share's $800. It's not cute, but it's not scary. Something unclenched in me that had been clenched so long I'd forgotten it was a fist. When would you move? End of the month, she said. If I can get help with boxes. She finally smiled small and factual. Boxes, not rent. I nodded. I can give you a Saturday. She looked past me into the street where a couple walked a dog that wanted to smell everything. I hated you so much when you said 30 days, she said. It felt cruel. It felt like toppling a shrine, I said. To me, too. We were quiet. A bus sighed at the light and continued. On someone's balcony, wind chimes pretended to be weather. I'm scared, she said finally, a whisper like admission. I always knew there was a net. Me, I said. Not accusing, naming. You're allowed to be scared and still get a roommate. Fear and action aren't mutually exclusive. She laughed wet. You sound like a podcast. I sound like a woman who learned boundaries in a club dining room, I said. When we stood, she hugged me like a person instead of a project. Thank you for not letting me be worse, she said into my shoulder. I will probably still mess up, but I'll call you before the mess, not after. Call me before 9, I said, and she snorted. Day 15. Helen texted lunch, my treat. Over-roasted chicken at a place that had been in the neighborhood long enough to count as family. She looked at me directly. I made independence your job when you were a child, she said. I thought it was protection. It was abdication. I'm sorry. I inhaled like someone who'd been underwater. Thanks, I said, because it was the only proper word. I can give Stella my old dresser, she added. And you, she hesitated. I have a small fund your grandmother left me. It's not much, but if you apply to a program this fall, I can help with one class. The offer landed like cool water. I'll think about it, I said, which meant yes, and she knew it. That night, Derek and I finally took the 2-day cabin trip we'd been delaying for a year. We drove north until Chicago shrank into a skyline in the rear view, and the radio found more trees than stations. We cooked pasta over salted. It ate all of it anyway. We hiked a path lined with pines and the braggadocio of birds. By the fire, Derek said, You look lighter. I disconnected a secret IV, I said. Turns out it was attached to me. Back in the city day. 21 Gregory called. I let it go to voicemail and listened while stirring oats. I may have misapprehended the scope of your arrangement with your sister. He said, a sentence that would have been an apology if you tilted it. I dislike how you handled it, but I acknowledge I lacked information. We can revisit family dinners once the dust settles. I texted back noted. We can have coffee next week. Public place. No budgets on napkins. Day 24. Stella sent me a photo of 3 cardboard towers. Packed, she wrote. Do you have tape? I brought tape, labels, and a casserole because I am still my mother's daughter. We moved her in one trip with a rented van and the strength of 4 women who did not want to make 2. The loft was a rectangle with ambitions, the kind of place that forces you to decide how much of your life you actually need. Her roommates were kind, their plants alive. We made her bed and put the lamp where the book would be. Housewarming gift, I said, handing her a second-hand kettle and a grocery card. Small, practical, not a loophole. She placed the kettle on the narrow counter with reverence. I'll pay you back for the card, she said, almost defiant with the promise. You will, I said and believed it. On the train home, a notification rent autopay. Cancelled. I stared at the screen until the tunnel released us into daylight. Then I opened my banking app and moved the same wild $200 toward a future that had my name on it. The transfer confirmation looked ordinary like all the others I've sent. It wasn't. It was a map. At night before sleep, I wrote in my notebook, I can be generous without disappearing. I can love my sister without living her life. I can be a daughter without being an apology. The words looked less like armor and more like instructions. A week later, I woke before my alarm and watched the early light braid itself into the blinds. My phone was quiet. No emergencies, no escalations, just a single message from Stella. My manager added hours. I made rent math work. Also, the coffee shop down the block is hiring part-time. I think I can swing both for a while. I'm okay. Then a second ping, a photo of a crooked little plant on her sill. Meet Fernie. Don't tell Dad, he'll want to name it. I smiled into my pillow and allowed myself an unproductive minute, the decadent kind that isn't a reward or a strategy. It was simply mine. Then I got up. The day had emails and decks, and perhaps if I let it a little time to click Start Application on a graduate program page, I had bookmarked and pretended not to see. Boundaries, I was learning, are not walls. They are doors with handles on your side. By the time September settled over the lake like a clean sheet, the noise had thinned into a new kind of quiet. Less siren, more hum. The autopay was gone, the condo fund ticked forward on payday with a reassuring little leap, and my phone had become a device for weather and music again instead of a crisis console. On a Tuesday afternoon, Gregory called, and for once didn't begin with an indictment. Coffee, he asked. Neutral ground. No speeches. I chose a cafe with good light and bad chairs. No one lingers in bad chairs. He arrived in his blazer, ordered an Americano, and stared at the foam like it might give him his lines. I may have underestimated the shape of things, he said finally. For my father, it was practically sackcloth. I thought I understood your situation because I recognized its contours from my vantage point. I did not. I appreciate you saying that, I answered. We sipped. He asked about work. I told him about a client who wanted a rebrand without changing anything. He smirked. Sounds like all of us. Before we parted, he slid an envelope across the table. Articles, he said, sheepish. On analytics. I thought they might help with your classes. It was the first time he'd used your classes like a fact, not a critique. That weekend, Stella texted dinner at my place. The roommates will be in and out, but I can make pasta and a salad if you bring bread. Her apartment in Ravenswood was honest in the way starter homes can be secondhand chairs, a plant learning what it meant to reach for light. A small corkboard labeled bills with due dates in her handwriting. She stood over a saucepan with a wooden spoon, hair up sleeves, push no performance. I got assistant manager, she said, eyes wide and proud, and a little stunned by her own follow-through. Inventory scheduling. Less sparkle, more spreadsheets. I like it. She chewed her lip. I owe you $100 from last week in the grocery card you gave me. I'll send it Friday. You don't have to narrate it, I said gently. Just do it. That's new for both of us. She nodded. We ate at the small table she'd rescued from a curb and sanded herself. At the end, she handed me a mug with a crooked painted line. Ceramics class, she said, laughing. Community center version. $10 if you bring your own clay. We clinked our cheap mugs like crystal. In October, Helen asked me to walk with her through the conservatory. We moved past palms and humidity, our hair frizzing in sympathetic unison. I keep rehearsing apologies, she said, and none of them make time go backward. She touched a leaf as if checking for pulse. So I'm practicing forward. Tell me what support from me looks like now. Ask me what I want before telling me what peace requires, I said. And when I say no, don't translate it into maybe. She nodded. Deal. Then after a beat, I saved the dresser from your grandmother. Would you like it? Or shall I give it to Stella? I smiled. Give it to her. It's better at holding sweaters than boundaries. By November, the routine had become a scaffolding rather than a cage. Wednesday nights were for my graduate seminar. Sundays, I let myself cook without a timer. Paydays, I moved $100 and $200 to the condo line, then closed the app before it could suggest I was still behind. Derek and I developed a ritual. Fridays on his tiny balcony with 2 cheap beers and a list of small victories. He asked carefully if I wanted to look at apartments together next spring, or next springish, a timeline so gentle it felt like being handed a soft animal. Let's keep dating like this until February, I said. If I can hold schoolwork and my life together for 6 months, I can add us under one roof, without confusing need with love. He grinned. Boundaries as foreplay. I'm into it. In late November, Sabrina texted an invitation family dinner. Not the club, but a modest Italian place with red checkcloths and servers who called everyone dear. I said yes because the dreadnought didn't form. At the table, conversation moved as if learning to walk again. Gregory asked Stella about scheduling software. He asked me about my capstone and didn't turn it into advice. Helen told a funny story at her own expense. Sabrina flagged the server when the water got low, a quiet choreography of care I'd never given her credit for. When the bill came, Gregory covered it with the old flourish, and then unprecedented looked at me. "You'll let me take this one?" he asked. I held his gaze. "I will," I said. It wasn't capitulation. It was collaboration. Outside, the air bit at our cheeks. Gregory pulled me aside awkward as a man trying to dance off script. "You said something at coffee," he murmured, "about being the adult who pays the bills." "I've been thinking. I admired your competence so loudly that I forgot to admire you." The words landed where compliments seldom reach. "Thank you," I said, and didn't add a single hedging sentence. December sharpened. Stella texted photos of a budget spreadsheet with categories she'd invented herself. Rent, groceries, transit fun. tiny on the first. A transfer hit my account $100 note line for GC. I didn't reply with praise. I sent a thumbs up and a screenshot of my tuition receipt. We were learning to celebrate by informing, not performing. One cold morning, I stood at my window and watched snow try to become itself. The city made that soft winter sound, cars' quieter footsteps deliberate. The kettle clicked off. I poured tea into the crooked mug. On my desk sat a folder labeled applications and a stack of printed drafts with Dr. Rima's penciled notes. My phone buzzed once. Stella got my schedule. Extra hours approved. Also, Fernie the plant didn't die when the heat came on. Another buzz. Dad article on Consumer Insight. Page 3 might interest you. A third, Derek ice skating. Saturday fair warning. I'm an enthusiast, not a talent. 3 messages, none of them about rescue. It felt like weather I could live in. On New Year's Eve, I wrote 3 sentences on an index card and tucked it inside my wallet. Generosity without disappearance. Honesty without spectacle. Ambition without apology. At midnight, we stood on Derek's roof with a handful of neighbors, the skyline a set of glittering coordinates. Fireworks stitched color into the fog. I made no wish. I'd already built a plan. When January invoices came due, Stella didn't text. Rent cleared. She sent me a photo of her pay stub like a postcard from a city she'd moved to in daylight. A week later, I received an email, acceptance spring cohort. I read it twice, then again aloud, then sent a screenshot to the group chat we never officially named me Helen Derek, and recently added Stella. The replies arrived in a small, perfect wave, a string of party emojis from Stella, proud of you from Derek, and from Helen simply about time. On the morning of my first class, I walked past a storefront where someone had hand-painted a sign. We fix what we can. We name what we can't. I smiled because that was it, the whole arc in 12 words. We hadn't polished our way into perfection. We had learned names and used them. Rent, resentment, relief, respect. I texted Stella a practical note. Call your utility provider. They'll set you up on budget billing, and she replied, already did. I put my phone away, pushed open the glass door of a building that smelled like books and heat, and felt the kind of nervous that means you are exactly where your past self hoped you'd be. Inside the classroom, a professor wrote strategy, il choice on the whiteboard. I uncapped my pen, underlined the sentence, and in the margin added my own boundaries equals love. It was both lesson and ledger, the clearest math I'd ever done. I took a breath. Then I began. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.